Welcome to StartupJab.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 19 of Startup Jab. Man, it's cold outside. Which, to be fair, brings us to our first question from the audience. Is it actually cold outside? From the incredible CJ Cross. And the answer is cold is relative, and it may be cold wherever you are. So, yeah, it's cold outside. Let's go with that.
I don't know. I think Jason, this is a case of why you shouldn't pick an episode title based on the weather of the current day when you're picking the title rather than the day that we're actually recording it.
You know, Teague, I don't need this malarkey from you. This, of course, is Teague Hopkins, the orange to my apple in terms of comparisons. I, of course, am Jason Ellis, and we appreciate you joining us this week. Teague, I don't know if you know this. I got reached out to by a couple people this week who have started listening to us that I have never invited directly. We just seem to actually be growing an audience, which I think proves the fact that my ego can get larger. Yeah.
With enough support.
Oh, yeah, obviously. Yeah. How are you doing this week, my friend?
I'm doing quite well, actually.
Yeah.
That's nothing to complain about.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. I unfortunately can't share the same sentiment. It has been a rather frustrating last week or so, I have to tell you.
Yeah. You know, tell us a little more about that.
Sure. Great setup, by the way. Nice redevelopment. Good Lord.
Well, you didn't give me much to go on.
You know, I just assumed you'd be more creative. That's not fair. I apologize. No, we talked about this before the show started. It's been an interestingly challenging week. You know, my business outside of Startup Jab, and actually, I guess related to it, is a creative agency and marketing and technology and all those things wrapped into one. And this has been a really good year for us. We've been challenged by a lot of different growth, a lot of different opportunities. Some things have gone really well. And like we've discussed in the past, some things don't always pan out the way that you anticipate that they will. And one of the challenges that we hit this week was that a couple of small clients decided that they were going to pursue other directions for a variety of reasons, some of which were related to, you know, a perception of the quality of work that they were receiving, which is certainly something we have to work on internally, as well as clients who simply are moving in different directions. It doesn't change the fact that 3 of them hit in a week. It not only affects our bottom line a little bit, but it also just destroyed my ego for a couple of days. I mean, it was not fun.
works.
Yeah.
I think, it's also really frustrating when it just doesn't work and you can't figure out why.
Yeah.
And it just keeps throwing out errors. I think, part of the reason you asked why I'm a power user, why I prefer to do that. My background is in technology. My undergraduate degree was in computer science. I'm a programmer. I have that programmer mentality of being lazy, in that, like, I don't want to have to do something multiple times. Like, once I do it, I want to be able to automate it so I never have to do it again.
Right.
And so it's things like that. Like, even, with this podcast, we get an MP3 from Blab with the recording of the show, and we have to, we could just upload that directly, but it's pretty high bit rate, and we want to save the download times for folks who are listening to the podcast. And so we down convert that to a reasonable bit rate for spoken audio. And once I figured out how to automate that, it's 2 clicks instead of like having to open it and make selections and re-encode it and everything. It's really nice to save that time week after week.
Right. That's why I leave those things to you, because I would look at that and go, I don't know. And then just start uncontrollably weeping in front of everybody, which is really embarrassing at the office. I mean, it just doesn't work.
That's why I work at home, so that when technology makes me uncontrollably weep, there's no one around to see it.
Just tea sitting. Anyway, clearly. Cool. Well, yeah, I mean, I think, folks that are listening, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Feel free to write into us and tell us whether you think Apple is going down a good direction when it comes to design, or if you think, they're crap, but we're going to keep using the iPhone anyway because it's super cool and everybody wants one.
You just put us squarely in the middle of a flame war.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is how you grow audience, Teague. It's called science.
Science. Mm-hmm. It works.
Sure. What about you? What are some of the things you're keeping your eye on this week?
So I came across a great one in the last week. There's a newsletter called Springwise that occasionally posts some very interesting articles about new startups. And one that I thought was very interesting is the startup called What 3 Words, that is trying to create simple addresses for the entire world. So if you've ever, been to a developing country, that not everywhere has an address like it does in the United States, right? Like, we have street addresses, we have zip codes, we have ways to identify a particular physical location. The difference is, if you're in, countries where there's a lot of undeveloped roads, there's a lot of, small villages, it may be harder to specify a location. And if you want to send something to somebody, it can be difficult to do that with a postal system that's not as finalized. So what this company is doing is they've divided the entire world's surface into 57 trillion 3x3 meter squares and given each one a unique locator that is 3 words. And I tested in a couple different countries. It looks like all of their words are in the English language, which may be slightly problematic moving forward. But as Ryan in the chat says, you can't pick your own locator. No, you can't. Nope. Although, because they are 3x3 meters, if you have a building, you may have multiple locators to choose from. Right. And they are not sequential, so they may be totally different. For instance, the patio or the deck at WeWork Wonder Bread is cute number social, which is cute. It's also Flesh Lodge Vital, which is a little bit creepier. That sounds like a bad late night Cinemax horror film that gets uncomfortably. Yeah. So those are both options that you can choose from for drone delivery to the patio. Sure. Whereas the corner near my house is Having Bugs Manual, and across the street we have Same Palm City. Funny story. There are no palm trees where I live. Yeah. So I think this is kind of cool. I think, they're thinking about it in terms of, as we start getting drone delivery, you may want to be able to specify, you also may want to be able to specify something more specific than a street address, right? You may want to say, like, hey, Amazon drone that's bringing me that package, why don't you drop it off in my backyard instead of like, because why not?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know that I'd feel comfortable saying, "Hey, Amazon, can you do me a favor and leave this at Rocky Smiles thick?" Because they may misinterpret that and think I'm pitching a new Rocky concept. And given that I heard that Creed was pretty good, they may not be open to it. So I don't know.
Yeah. I'm just imagining, asking someone to meet me at Cute Number Social or at Flesh Lodge Vital.
Cute Number Social just sounds like a new startup.
It kind of does.
Yeah. So this is interesting. Producer Katie, as I'm now dubbing her, says that the one for near her place in Europe is in French. So there you go.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good to know. I looked at a couple of places, but I did not look everywhere. So I wonder if they've actually made an attempt to match names in a particular language to the country that the location is in. If the country has
could be based on your IP address in terms of what language they're displaying.
Oh, that's interesting too. Then you run into challenges of like, okay, is it actually a unique locator if I get a different response from somebody else?
Well, let's see. Let's try.
Translation is not one-to-one specific for most languages, so I feel like it must be based on the location rather than on the country of IP address.
Well, let's see. If I go to Paris, I get English.
Really?
If I go to Beijing, I get map not available. All right. Moscow. Here we go.
Okay.
Let's see.
So there's still a few
bugs. Moscow gives me English too. Oh, that's so interesting.
So yeah, that's fascinating. So if you go to Brussels, do you get French like our producer Katie did, or do you get English also?
I get English.
Oh, see, that's a problem, I think.
Yeah.
Right. That seems highly problematic because there are a lot of words that have multiple translations. Yeah, this is very interesting.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to see what they do with that.
Yeah, I would imagine that they're going to have to either just agree to localize it or it's just going to all have to be one language.
Could be.
Yeah,
could be. Which makes it a little bit more difficult to use as a as a spoken identifier for a physical location, right? If I have to, I'm trying to imagine trying to pronounce something in Russian or in Chinese and get it correct as an English speaker, and I have to imagine the reverse would be equally difficult. Well, not equally difficult. I think it's a lot harder to learn Chinese than it is to learn English. But we may be stuck with latitude and longitude coordinates for a little while longer.
Look at it this way. It is not a growing data set. It is a set amount of information. There is a solution. It's just a matter of finding it. So
that's fair.
At the very least, we know it's not going to be a challenge that, it's not going to be a challenge that we can't actually, I can't. I'm not good at technical solutions. I'm good at creative solutions. Anyway, I'm sorry for the today.
You're getting a little feedback there. I'm getting some choppiness in the audio. I don't know if that's on my end or if you guys are hearing that in the chat as well.
Yeah, I think it was kept up with us. There we go. A little bit of a processing challenge, I imagine.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I had nothing else on that one.
Well, then I'll turn to a minute. You pointed this article out, and I've been looking through it, and I find it fascinating about talking of the two sides of employee engagement. It's such an interesting challenge to. Well, why don't you describe it? Because I don't want to. It's your article you found. I don't want to give away the goose on that one.
So, I mean, perfectly happy to. The summary is basically it's an article from HBR, and it says that employee engagement matters, and most companies use satisfaction as a proxy for employee engagement, but that kind of misses half the picture. And the solution they propose is looking at it from two sides, right? You have the perceptions. And that's what most companies measure, like how happy somebody is at the company. And then you also have behaviors, which are how they actually act and doesn't always get measured, right? So So there's a big difference between someone who has a positive association with a company and destructive behaviors, and somebody who has a positive association with a company and constructive behaviors, right? And the difference in they've got a nice 3x3 grid here, which is they've listed out the various intersections of negative, indifferent, and positive behaviors with destructive, neutral, and constructive behaviors. Perceptions with behaviors.
Well, which I think is interesting because, I mean, if you look at the spectrum of behaviors, there are ways of being positive and negative at the same time, right? So if your behavior is constructive, but you are, there's a negative perception around, your work or the work that you do, or rather your perception of it is negative, you could be, you're sort of martyring yourself, which I think is interesting.
Right. Yeah. And you may be getting burnt out. And even though the work that you're doing is great for the company and very constructive, your perception of the way that you're doing that work may be that you're unappreciated and that you're going to get burnt out and you're likely to, leave or change the way that you do the work or
in opposition to that, folks that I'm sure we all have, we're thinking of when we say this, where their behavior is destructive, but there is a positive perception of themselves or around them, and they're a brat. I'm a little disappointed that on the spectrum, if your behavior is neutral and your perception is positive, the answer is underachiever. My answer is, why isn't there overachiever instead of all-star? We could have had such a nice comparison there, and I would have gotten some branding for a company that doesn't really exist anymore. Damn it.
For those of you who don't know, Jason's old company was called Overachiever.
Right, and now it's called Brilliant. So clearly we have a problem with humility. And as Ryan is saying in the chat, this is absolutely the D&D alignment chart for businesses. So
excellent. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I've always thought of you as lawful, as a lawful good, and myself as chaotic evil.
That's why we work so well
together.
Right,
because we make D&D references that a third of our audience doesn't get. That's right, the other 2/3. I'm calling you out. Everybody's like, it's not me. I swear, I've never played. I've never rolled a dice or a die, whatever you call it. Damn it. That would have been so much better if I gotten it right.
I actually had a discussion with some folks yesterday on Facebook about mapping the rolls of smaller dice to a D20 and whether you could simulate a D4 with a D20.
I hate you so much.
Actually, I'm sorry. Whether you could simulate a D6 with a D20. D4 is easy, right? Yeah. Like D4 is an easy map that divides evenly. But the D6 you can still map it. You just map it as a D18 and re-roll on a 19 or 20.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Basically, you figured out division as it applies to a terminating set. Oh my god.
Remainders. It's easy. This is simple.
Here's my question for you. So we look at this chart and we identify, let's for the moment agree that these are 9 employee engagement archetypes that we agree on. Is there a way that these different archetypes can work together? I mean, is it possible that you really can have an all-star who has, positive perception and constructive behavior existing at the same time as a saboteur or a drifter? I mean, do we have to all aim for one part of the spectrum, or is it possible that they can coexist in certain ecosystems?
Well, I think that the assumption is that you want to move people towards positive perceptions and constructive behavior.
Yeah.
And if you can't move them towards that, it probably is not helping you. For instance, it's certainly not helping you to have a saboteur in your company if you can't move them towards a more positive or more constructive.
Well, sure, but there are certainly companies large enough that would have all of these contained in the company, and they still seem to, grow and make money, and people don't quit there every day. So is it? I mean, I'm wondering if the answer is just you need to be big enough that you can section those people off, or if it's everybody.
I think ideally you have a process where you identify and either transition them out or help them move into a more productive mode. And if you don't have that process, it becomes, this is the challenge where the larger a company gets, the harder it is to have everybody in the company be a high performer. And that makes it harder to attract high performers. And so as companies grow, the concentration of talent is going to get more diffuse, even simply because there are not enough high performers in one city to have an entire, 10,000 person company be all high performers.
Sure. Well, I mean, as a low performer in most of my life, no, not true. Can't call yourself
not true, even
remotely. On the contrary, see, this is my problem. We don't do humility and modesty well, and that also means apparently it turns into self-deprecation. Now that is a spectrum we should build. Humility,
There's
humility and modesty.
There's totally a 2x2 for
exactly.
this.
Just it's humility, modesty, and in the top left corner, or in the bottom left corner, it's just me. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's an interesting concept. I think it's always a challenge in my mind to try to create archetypes and, by extension, sort of definitions for the way that people interact with each other, how much they contribute, the different ways that you perceive that. I think this does, in my mind, present an interesting way of sort of giving everybody at least some starting place for that conversation, so that you could hypothetically sit somebody down and say, look, your behavior is such that, you're neutral to positive in most of these things, but the perception around you is neutral to negative, and we need to work on that.
Yeah, and I think it is a useful framework for thinking about these types of problems, for thinking about employee engagement. And I think whenever we're using frameworks, we want to be careful to remember that individuals are people, right? They're not simply a saboteur or an all-star. They are an actual individual human with different motivations and feelings and needs. And we like to abstract complicated things like interpersonal relationships and like performance management because they are very complicated. It's really hard to hold all of that in your head at once. And without a framework for thinking about it, it can be so complicated that we just sort of give up and stop managing it. The difficulty is walking that fine line between relying on frameworks that help you make it manageable enough to actually do something about, and relying so much on the frameworks that we stop treating people as individuals and start treating them as cogs in a wheel, right? Or parts of a team. It's difficult when managers start thinking about managing a team instead of managing individuals, right? They start treating it as a single monolithic entity instead of as diverse individuals.
You're a monolithic entity. You're welcome.
Well, thank you.
Well, I'd like to take a break from the articles for a moment, because I think that there's something that came across in the mailbag for you that is particularly interesting. You want to touch on that, or I'm happy to do the reading of the question if you think that's valuable.
Sure. You've got the great radio
I disagree
voice.
with that. Yours is quite lovely. So Teague can provide a little bit. Actually, why don't you give a little context to this before I read the question out loud?
Sure. So this is a question from Pranav on Quora in response to a Quora answer that I wrote a while ago, and he's asking for some more clarification on a couple things, and we wanted to give that clarification here.
Cool. So his questions were, and he prefaces by saying that he's an amateur entrepreneur. Number one, how many? Truth. And I'm going to try to read this, and then there may be some interpretation. I'm wondering if there was maybe some quick typing involved. How many number of target customers can give a hang of whether the customer needs it? Whoa, actually, this one I'm missing. Okay, I think the question is.
So I think the question on this first one is when you're doing customer interviews and you're talking to target customers, how many do you have to talk to before you really get a feel for whether the particular product or problem is worth solving? Well, so it's kind of the question of, I think the question is, how many customer interviews is enough?
Well, and once you define that, what are the hacks that I think he's asking for? Hacks to reaching out to the maximum number of them, either through cold calling or email or conducting interviews over the phone. Is that the right way? Or is interviewing people more, making more sense? There's time and investment in travel, commuting, getting the appointment, waiting a long time. Pace and immediacy become a question. We've addressed, we've talked about this during, here it comes, Kiki, the lean startup stuff that we've done in the past about customer experience and customer interviews. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the answer is going to be, it's always better to just get out there and talk to as many people as possible when you're doing the discovery phase. And then you have to set a number based on your own estimate of what's going to prove value for you.
Yeah. So we'll sort of take the question in two parts because it was asked in two parts. The first being how many people is enough, and the second being how should you talk to them. So in response to sort of the first part of how many people is enough, I always like to go with the somewhat glib answer of 10 people paying you or boredom. As the point in time when you stop doing customer development and move on to sort of the next phase. And what I mean by that is if you are simply asking people about the problem and you have like 10 people say, oh my God, I really have that problem. Do you have a solution for me? Will you can I pay you for the solution now? Can I pre-order? Then you have probably found something that is painful enough that you should focus on solving it. And there's you want to be careful about this, right? Like this should be 10 actual people paying you, right? Like you should get their credit card number and an agreement that you will charge them for this, not simply people saying yeah, I would pay for something like that, because we all know that the distance between what people say they want and what they actually want is
oh boy,
a canyon.
Yeah, the number of people that I'd love that. That sounds great. Great. Can I have your credit card? Oh no.
Right. No. And that's why you ask for the credit card up front, because you want to find out what their actual reservation is before you start building it, instead of after you built it and they say, oh, actually what I really meant was XYZ.
We're gonna call that Hopkins law from now on. 10 people,
10 people or boredom. I don't think I can take credit for that. I'm pretty sure I've stolen that from somebody
else. Who cares?
Else.
Everything's been stolen from somebody else. Just own it until they file a trademark or a copyright infringement lawsuit.
I wish I could attribute it to somebody. But and the boredom side of it, right, is either you simply get bored with trying to solve this problem, or you find that in having more and more of these conversations, you start hearing the same things over and over again, and you can now predict, given a set of questions, what words people are going to use in their response, right? You pretty much know, okay, once you've qualified this person is in my target market, and these are the questions that I'm going to ask them, I know now what they're going to say. And that's what I mean by boredom, is you have gotten to the point where you're not learning anything new. And that I think is that's what I mean by boredom.
I don't know. I think one of the challenges that young entrepreneurs and let's call them amateur entrepreneurs face is that,
or simply
just people doing their thing.
All of us.
Yeah. I think more often than not, we're looking for an external validation, right? We're looking for a point of data that tells us we've done enough work. And there is seldom, if ever, that, bar against which one can base themselves. So I would say that the rule certainly makes sense to me. Or even as an arbitrary number, if you were to pick a number of people that you're just going to straight up interview, if you set it high enough, you'll probably hit boredom. So let's say 50. You're going to talk to 50 people. By the time you talk to 50 people, you're totally bored. You've hit your limit. And then you should have enough data to tell you the right thing or the wrong thing. So whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing, rather.
Yeah. And I think, I usually try to avoid giving a specific number, because sometimes, you're working on something that you know a lot about and it's pretty simple. And after 5 conversations, you're not hearing much new. And or maybe you then do a couple more just because you want to be sure. But if you go into those 6th and 7th conversations and you're like, yeah, I knew everything that person was going to say. Yeah, you may be falling prey to a little bit of cognitive bias, but you might also simply just have enough of an understanding to move on to the next phase. Right?
Yeah, I think it was about a year ago when I was participating in a lean startup machine that you were coaching, and within the idea that I had pitched became and morphed into doing research into online marketing for self-published ebook authors, which is such a weirdly specific niche. And even now I look back and think, how the hell did we get talked into that? Because we had 14 coaches all giving us conflicting advice, I think is the answer to that. Not you, thank God. But
I was definitely one of those coaches.
Your advice was good. Advice. So no, but I do remember that within the first 4 or 5 interviews, it was very clear that whatever concept we'd had for how to solve the problem that we perceived was so unbelievably askew from what they were really talking about, which was we were looking for a low-cost set of tools or programs that would help these people. And what they were really looking for was somebody to do the work for them for free.
Yes. Yeah. It's amazing how many businesses end up that way. I had a business that I was working on actually quite a few years ago now, on social media management systems for small businesses. Yeah. And I was like, oh man, this is totally going to be, the next big thing. It's going to get all of these small businesses to start, managing their social media better. It's going to make it so easy. And in doing the customer development interviews, I heard time and again, like, yeah, I just want to pay someone to do that for me. And like, oh, well, okay. They're not actually looking for a tool. They don't want it to be made easier. They just want someone to handle it. And for a lot of stuff like, for helping them with an ebook or helping them with social media, sometimes that person ends up just being an unpaid intern, and that's hard to compete with.
Yeah, true enough. Well, to the second point of the question, what are your thoughts on the right medium for doing customer interviews? Because, certain platforms and certain ways of doing it can get you different kinds of information. What are your thoughts on the right application of that?
Yeah. So, and he's referencing a little bit in the original answer. I talked about high bandwidth versus low bandwidth communication. And by high and low bandwidth, what I mean is not like the fact that we're getting some choppy audio because of our bad internet connection. What I mean is the amount of information you get out of each conversation. So if you think about it in terms of the number of customers you talk to, each one will give you some amount of information, and you can sort of multiply that across all of them. If I have 5 face-to-face conversations, I'm going to get not just the words that people use, but also the tone of voice that they're using, their body language, their facial expressions, their specific answers, their rambling answers to my questions, because they're just talking and they're going to give me some valuable information that way. If I have those same conversations on, say, video chat like this, I lose some of the body language, right? And I may not get as much of the rambling answers because we're not sitting there just chatting. We're sort of scheduled a particular time to talk, and when we're done talking, we're done talking. And if I go to voice only, I lose also their facial expressions in addition to the body language. And if you go to email, you lose the tone of voice. And if you go to a landing page, you lose, all of the words that they chose themselves, and you only get their sort of binary yes/no response. So I think of that as this, this bandwidth of communication curve, where at the top you're getting all of this rich information from each one. It's also pretty expensive to do each one. And if once you're way down at the bottom with just a landing page, all you're getting is that binary yes or no. But you can push that out to like 10,000 people for the cost of doing a couple of face-to-face interviews, right? And so it depends on where you are in the process. I like to say, stay at the top of the bandwidth of communication curve as long as it is valuable, right? As long as you're still, when you're early in the process and that directional information is really useful, being higher on the curve is valuable. And you do have to figure out, relative values. So I think the question, getting back to the question that was asked, right, instead of this wonderful tangent, maximizing the people you're reaching out to, right? Doing cold calls or email, doing interviews over the phone. Is it advisable? Yeah, sometimes it's advisable. And that's really not necessarily a useful answer. That yes, sometimes that is the right approach. I really like to start with in-person interviews first, but I think it's okay to move on from that pretty quickly, right? It's you want to, when you're doing an in-person interview, you might pick up on like some of the questions you're asking are making people uncomfortable in a way that you wouldn't necessarily notice if you were having the conversations on the phone. And so after you've had a couple of those, you've sort of smoothed out your interview process, and then it's okay. Now I'm ready to go talk to a lot more people. I'm going to start doing phone calls instead. So I don't think you have to do all of them at the, that most costly, like bring people into the office or go to their office and meet with them, go to a coffee shop, because it is costly. And that, I think, that transitions into our next question.
Well, yeah. And I think so Vanessa in the chat is asking about what are the incentives, if any, for face-to-face chats, or, comparing them to other types of chats / surveys and that sort of thing. In my experience, one of the great things about sitting down with somebody and actually having them face to face is it's a different kind of conversation. It's a different kind of energy than if you're trying to, do a bunch of phone calls in one day, or, you're doing a series of FaceTimes and Skype calls, or you're trying to send out a survey. There's something about sitting down with an individual in that same space. And I get, admittedly, I'm doing a little theatery, hokey kind of stuff, but you share space with them, you share energy with them. They become more, hopefully they become more comfortable with you quicker and share things with you that they wouldn't otherwise share. And I think that's actually a really valuable part of this, that sometimes doing face-to-face, in-person sit-down conversations like that take tangents you wouldn't otherwise anticipate, right? If you're on a phone call, if you are, if you're on a Skype call, whatever, somebody's probably distracted. I mean, 9 times out of 10, right? How many times are we all on Skype calls where, we're all just staring at the camera at each other, just without breaking.
Right. And it's obvious that actually what I'm doing here is I'm reading an article on the same screen that has the chat on it and pretending to look at your face very intently.
Or if you're self-centered like I am, just looking at your own face. Man. But more to the point, I think that one of the challenges that we encounter in customer discovery that has to be addressed in in-person interviews is that sense of, get to know me a little bit as much as I'm trying to get to know you. Understand that my purpose for asking these questions isn't, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm not nefarious. I'm not trying to, trying to get a thing out of you that I can then turn around and sell to you. I'm just learning. And I think that's a really valuable part of that. Everything else is valuable. There's use cases where you need 5,000 responses to something, so you have to send a survey out. And that becomes a whole different art form, because by that point, hopefully, you've established a lot of the elements of what you're trying to build, and you need information about specific problems in it. In terms of incentives, I think that that's based on budget, on how quickly you need the feedback. There's a lot of questions there that I don't know that I necessarily answer. Truth of the matter is, I don't want to offer incentives if I don't have to. I think that if you need to incentivize people, there's other questions that you need to address in terms of, are the questions you're asking compelling enough, or even you just need a large enough answers? You got to give everybody $10 at Starbucks.
Yeah, it gets tricky, right? Like yes, CJ in the chat has made the exact point that I was about to make, which is incentives could change the reason people are there.
The Heisenberg principle in research. Yeah. Come on,
I'm not going to think about that one too hard. We'll come back to that at some point.
You're the worst.
But no, I think it does make a difference, right? You don't want to over justification is a problem, right? Yeah. You don't want people's motivations for being there to be purely about the money. Hopefully it's because they have some interest in what you're actually talking about, because then they're more likely to do more than the bare minimum of like answering your questions with the like, okay, what is the least information I can give you to get my $20? Right. And yeah, I think, small incentives can be a nice thank you. Particularly, and actually this is one way that I've seen that's interesting is not promising an incentive up front, but giving someone a thank you after the fact, particularly if you're trying to get referrals to more folks. Because giving them that little gift that was unexpected gets people to say, oh, actually, I will totally like tell 5 of my friends that they should take your survey or talk to you or take your phone call or get coffee with you. And it creates a little bit of that reciprocity.
Yeah, absolutely. As CJ's saying in the chat, just like I'm going to pitch a party later today that has free food and booze.
He says he's going to a pitch party later today.
Sorry, he's going to throw. I thought he said he was going to throw one. I clearly need my coffee. But the truth is, any pitch party that offers free food and booze, as a guy who used to do tongue twisters as a warm up, you'd think I could do that. But that any pitch party is that the incentive is that here's free food and here's free liquor, misses the point, right? I mean, it's nice to have, and it's probably a good way to get some extra people there. But in the end, it's not the same value. It's not the same opportunity as, hey, we've got the really smart people here, and if you want to come pitch and get some really good feedback on your pitch, that's going to be more valuable to you. I think the right incentive in the right place matters. It
does matter, and I think so. I should disclose that, in fact, I'm on the judging panel for that.
You're all going to fail. He's going to fail. Yeah, well, everyone. Your pitch sucks. Now somebody get me some damn booze. It's kind of how it's be. Yep.
So I do think that the if you're going to do incentives, the value of the incentive needs to be matched to the ask that you're making. So if you're asking people to come out to a thing on a Tuesday night, maybe free food is what it takes to get people to come out, even though it's something that they're interested in. And it's not so much that people are willing to come out if they're not interested in it at all. Maybe when you throw in free booze, you get a lot of folks who are like, yeah, I'm going for the free food and booze, and I don't care at all about startup pitches. Hard to know necessarily.
Well, you'll know tonight. You'll tell us.
We'll find out. Yeah, we'll find out. Christian, who's a friend of the show, is organizing this.
Is this?
But
tonight?
No, and I actually forget where it is. I have it written down somewhere, fortunately, so I'll show up at the right place. But it's not.
No, it's not a WeWork invite, which means it's 1776. And for those of you who don't live in the DC area, none of this matters to you. The reason I ask is because I think one of the things that is also potentially incentivizing. I see. It's not there. Anyway, more to the point. One of the things I think could be incentivizing or something that is incentivizing in these kinds of experiences is also the networking aspect, right? If you find some opportunity to present this as, I'm building something for this industry, I'm going to make it an event where I can learn a lot about this industry and then connect people within that industry and making as much of a networking opportunity as a research opportunity. That to me feels like better incentive than, here's a food plate from Safeway and, the handle of Jim Beam that's been left over in my house since we, moved in here. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, do you not have a bottle of Jim Beam just sitting around waiting for people to show up so you can do customer discovery?
No, we do slightly higher shelf.
Oh, you fancy now. Anyway, we'll have to do a show at some point just about our favorite whiskeys, just for an hour, just talk about whiskey. That'd be the worst show ever, except it for me would be the best show ever.
It might be very interesting, although I'm probably not knowledgeable enough to speak to that.
Yep.
So
yeah,
we'll have to get some experts in.
We'll teach you. How's that?
That'd be great. That'd be a good show.
All right. Well, yeah, we'll hashtag Top Shelf Jab. I like that, actually. We might have to steal that one from you, Vanessa. In any event, so we've got a few more minutes before we wrap up today's conversation. I don't know, T, anything else without diving into an article? I mean, anything else interesting happening that sort of top of mind, things you want to share?
Well, now you've got me thinking about this pitch competition tonight.
Yeah. All right, let's do this. So tonight you're going to a pitch competition where you're judging. I'm actually doing the same thing at Georgetown for a class. Let's have fun.
Oh, I did that last week.
There you go. How did that go for you?
Yeah, it was great.
Good.
Very, very interesting. It's, it's always interesting to talk to people who are thinking about being entrepreneurs, and this class is taught by a friend of ours, and it's different from a pitch competition because Eric Custer's the professor, and he understands that when you are an undergrad, your particular business is not, your particular business idea is not that predictive of your future success.
Yep.
Usually it has more to do about, your approach to being an entrepreneur. And I think that's a really great approach, and I like the way that he frames it. So I think you'll have some fun tonight with those interviews.
Well, let me ask you this, and we'll share our individual thoughts on it. What makes a really great, one or two things that make a great pitch? I won't ask my usual, like, if you could go back in time, but like, what are the qualities of a good pitch that you look for?
So generally, in terms of a business pitch, the stuff that I look for has to do with how much they've already validated, which, not surprising given how much I like Lean Startup. But it's very much, do you have a business model? Do you have do you know who your customers are? Have you proven any of this? In fact, actually, a lot of what I look for in a pitch is, walk me through your lean canvas. Yes. I've had conversations before with folks where I start listing out, here are the things that we should talk about your business, as we're doing some consulting, and folks will be telling us about the business. So tell me about X, Y, Z, these other things. And then I realize about halfway through, like, oh, I'm actually going through the lean canvas. Let's just pull one of those out and write it down. Rather than just like doing this in the abstract and then realizing later that we covered every square on the lean canvas. So that's a lot of what I look for in a business.
No, I'm with you on that one. The one thing that I also point to, because I think that there's as much that you can teach an MBA about the different components of validation, and and this is an MBA program, which is why I use this example. But you can teach an MBA student, for example, all the different data points that they need to validate, all the different methods that they have available to them to build a minimum viable product, and then to explore how they go to market with it. But the thing that kills me is this: when somebody takes their notes out and they go, hello, my name is Jason, and they're looking up and down from their note card. And today I would like you to invest in StartupJab. StartupJab is going to revolutionize the way that and I'm out. Your pace is off.
And I mean, you're a theater guy, right? Like, so that's your wheelhouse, right? You are good in front of a crowd.
That's my point. You have to be. It doesn't matter that I'm a theater guy. As a business guy, as a sales guy or girl, to be clear, I'm not being sexist. You have to be good at pitching yourself, right? You have to be good at being in front of a crowd and actually being able to confidently state, this is who I am and this is what I stand for. Media training is absolutely worth the investment, as is being pointed out by producer Katie. And yes, okay, I have a theater background. I'm proud of it. It's okay. It did in fact teach me that there are certain things that no matter who you're speaking to, confidence and forethought in your conversation goes a long way, right? I absolutely can get behind a business concept that is well developed, but if I don't have confidence in the person who's presenting it to me, I don't know that I'm going to buy into it.
So, and I want to, we should probably not dive quite so deeply into the confidence issue in this blab, but
really?
I think
because I had total confidence issues at the beginning. I feel like we bookended it quite nicely, actually.
Nicely
Thank
done. No, I think there are some issues with using confidence as a proxy for competence.
Sure.
And I think
there's a danger there. Absolutely.
We can talk more about that in the future, but I do agree with you that you want someone who has put in the effort, who's made the preparation, that they know what they're talking about, and that at least if they're not overconfident, at least that they have enough comfort with what they are talking about that it does not make them nervous to talk about it.
Totally.
I'm fine with folks who have trouble speaking in front of a crowd, right? That's I think one of the top 3 greatest fears of the population at large is speaking in front of a crowd.
Bees and zombies. Right? Yeah. Oh God. Yeah, right. Zombies.
Anyway, yes, I do agree that you want to see someone who's put in the preparation to actually practice a couple times to know what they're saying, and who's actually, that they are comfortable enough with what they are talking about that they can speak extemporaneously on the topic, right? You want someone who knows
what I want is deserved and well-earned confidence. I mean, you can talk about the fact that there's, as a theater guy, right, I know how to put together a good talk. But there's a difference between being able to read something off of a page effectively and actually having confidence that what I'm presenting to you has value and worth. CJ in the chat is suggesting that you could go to a pitch competition you're not competing at, and just tell people about your business. I actually used to get the advice that sometimes you go to auditions just to practice auditioning.
Just to
going for roles you would never get because you're not going to get them. You're just walking in to practice your monologue in front of an audience and get judged for it. Like, those have value. And my point is that you're right. We shouldn't. Competency and confidence in terms of your presentation are certainly not the same thing, but they go, confidence in your speech goes hand in hand with your ability to present a convincing case, right? This is why lawyers go through court training, because you can be the smartest guy in the world, but if you can't confidently speak in front of a jury or to a judge and know that what you're saying has value, you're useless as a trial attorney. So I think the same thing applies to pitches. There we go.
We'll talk more about this in a future episode. I have some very particular thoughts about confidence as an indicator of all kinds of things, but that's a topic for another episode. So if you don't want to miss that episode, you should subscribe to our podcast or to our email list on StartupJab.com. We send out emails when we're scheduling our shows, and we post these recordings of these live shows to our podcast after the fact.
And I do want to take a brief second, if I may, and just call out somebody who wrote in, Natalie from who I used to work with at Uber offices in DuPont. Reached out to us to give us some feedback on the show. She was very generous in her response. Folks like her, why we do this, like you guys participating live now, those of you who are downloading the podcast, we just want you to constantly reiterate our appreciation of your time and energy. So thank you again for that.
Yes. Thank you guys. Thanks for being so great in the chat room today.
Hey, Teague, how can everybody find you online?
You can find me online at Teague Hopkins on Twitter or at teaguehopkins.com.
Indeed. And you can find me at Jason Nellis on Twitter, and you can find my company and more about us at www.brllnt.co. That's brilliant, and it does not have the vowels, .co. I'm not buying that URL, damn it. Anyway.
Good.
Cool. Well, thanks again for joining us. Teague, play us out, buddy. We'll be right back.